Lovely. Right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for tonight's webinar on speech and language. So, tonight we are looking at Gestalt language processing stage two. So, we're looking at stage two of natural language acquisition. So my name, for those of you who don't know me, is Becky Frewin, and I am a consultant speech and language therapist with my own private practice. And I also work with the Cambridge ADHD and Autism Centre. So working, diagnosing and supporting children and young people with ADHD and autism. So this is my sort of favourite clinical field to work in. And it puts me in a good place to discuss things like Gestalt language processing. So housekeeping rules for Zoom, cameras on or off, I don't mind. It's the evening time, so most of us prefer to have our cameras off, and that's fine. Please do keep yourself on mute at all times, though, unless you're contributing at the end to the Q&A session. So at the end of the session, I will throw open the virtual floor and you can either type your questions into the chat box and I'll answer them, or you can kind of shout them out if it's one that's easier to discuss. If you think as we're going through, you have a question that you might forget, do pop it into the chat box as we go. Obviously, I won't answer it at that point, but I will have a look at them at the end. Come and go as you need. So I've got children at home. You might have children at home as well. Cups of tea, whatever. Doorbell goes. Do come and go as you need. Your slides will be emailed to you at the when we have received your feedback form, which has your email address on it. So don't worry about taking too many notes. You'll get a copy of this. As you probably all know by now, these webinars are fully funded and they are hosted by the Reach Out Early Years Stronger Practice Hub team, which comprises of Damon, Victoria, Jess and Lisa. We have got Damon online and I've also seen Lisa pop up as well. So thank you to those two for popping on to listen to me tonight. Stronger Practice Hubs, for those of you who aren't sure, were initially devised as part of the COVID-19 recovery catch-up program. And they were really, really well received by early years professionals, and the evidence for their success was strong. So they've now kind of morphed into regional hubs across the UK. It started out with 18, and there's going to be 36 as of this month. And they are supporting early year settings of all sorts, so nurseries, childminders, to improve outcomes across the EYFS. And they are funded by the DFE as part of the Best Start in Life strategy. Something that you can all access anytime is the Early Years Evidence Store, which is a web-based resource for everybody, which covers all sorts of topics across the early years foundation stage. So it has pilot projects, research, articles, case studies, all sorts of bits and bobs. So if you are a first-time practitioner early on in your career, you can learn loads of new things. And if you're a more experienced practitioner, you can keep up with the current evidence and make sure that nothing has changed. So my two favourite sort of areas of the early evidence store would clearly be the communication and language section. So you can see at the bottom here, we have lots of different topics such as teaching and modelling vocabulary, teaching and modelling language, interactive reading. Personal, social and emotional development is also a really good one that really floats my boat. And that covers things like feelings, managing feelings, being aware of feelings, social communication, lots and lots of bits and bobs. The hub can also offer bespoke support. So I would advise that you follow these QR codes and follow us on social media and get our newsletter. You will then see all of the wonderful things that the hub has to offer you. So there are webinars on all sorts of things, webinars on play, webinars on Ofsted frameworks, webinars on sustainability, loose parts play. They've got a brand new training catalogue now, so that all the previous training offers are now in like a big directory that you can go and easily search through. So there's loads of stuff on our YouTube channel as well. So there is a lot available to you fully funded from the hub. But if there's something where you're like, that's not quite what I need, I've got a really specific thing, do get in touch with Dame and Lisa Jesselvik, because they will be able to point you in the right direction and provide some kind of bespoke package for you. Okay, so please don't be shy. That's what the money is here for. So please do approach them. They're lovely. So the reason you're all here tonight is to learn a little bit more in our deep dive about Gestalt language processing. And tonight we are looking into stage 2 of natural language acquisition, which is where children begin to take their scripts and mitigate them. So they start to mix and match them. Now, today's webinar is heavily based on knowledge that you should have acquired in the previous 2 webinars. So the first Gestalt language processing webinar, which I've screen grabbed here, is kind of a whistle-stop tour throughout the whole process of natural language acquisition. And then the one we did last month was our deep dive into stage 1. If you are coming here tonight and you haven't seen either of those, you may find things a little bit hard to keep up with, because these webinars for this month, next month, and the month after are kind of cumulative. They're building on what you've learned in the previous ones. So please do bear that in mind when you're listening to me tonight. Not most of, but a lot of what I'm talking about tonight has been drawn from Alison Batty's book on Gestalt language processing, which you can get from Amazon. It's about £35, and it is a really good practical guidebook through Gestalt language processing and natural acquisition stages. Alison Batty is an independent speech and language therapist like myself, based in the UK. And this is probably the easiest, most comprehensive and simple to understand book there is out there. So I really recommend this to you. If you're only going to have one book on your bookshelf to support you in your knowledge around this subject, this is the one to get. I always like to start off with this quote that I discovered a few weeks ago. We are not hard to reach. You're just not listening in our key. Okay. I think this really resonates. These children, as we know from last month's webinar, are communicating meaningfully to us. We just need to work out the meaning behind what they're saying. So you will remember then that stage 1 is whole gestalts. So this is where children are quoting scripts, songs, whole phrases, whole sentences, whole chunks of anything really that they are using to communicate something to us. And I always like to bring a fresh one. I had a little lad in a nursery visit the other day. We were playing a lovely little orchard game, and he went, never marry a smoo, with just the biggest grin on his face. And it was just a gestalt of joy. He absolutely adores the smeds and the smoos. And this was his way of going, I am having the best time playing this game, Becky. It's ace. And I just loved it because I absolutely knew what he meant, and it was meaningful communication that I could respond to. Okay. So we are, as I've said, going to start talking though today about mitigations, okay, which is basically a fancy word for mixing and matching our gestalts. And I think this is where it gets interesting. Children start to become more easily understood. And at that point, you see the kind of incentivizing nature of being understood start to snowball, and it builds and it builds and it builds. We start to see more obvious sharing of thoughts and feelings and observations. Now, stage 2 can't start until the child has developed enough language material in stage 1. Okay, so they need to have a lot of gestalts containing a lot of language. That needs to build up over time. And it's only when they've got enough of those that they can start to play around with them that you will see them emerge into stage two. So stage one can't be hurried because we're building a big bank of phrases and a big bank of scripts that needs to be sufficient to play around with. Now, we also need to remember there's no universal bank of scripts. There's no universal kind of menu or algorithm for how many or what type of stage one gestalts a child needs to have or should have, because each child is different. So each child, particularly likely autistic children, will have different interests and different special deep interests. And from that comes a different bank of gestalts. And from that comes different mitigations. So it's not like your analytic or traditional language acquisition where I can go, they're going to do this, then they're going to do that, and then they're going to do that. I can sort of predict the roadmap. And that's what natural language acquisition stages 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 do. I can sort of predict the way it's going to pan out, but I can't give you specifics because every child is different and every bank of gestalts is different. Comparing a typical language development child who might go, I feel happy, you might have a child such as my one from the other day go, never, never marry a smoo. You might have another one going, dinosaurs are awesome. You might have another child going, I love ice cream. You might have another child going, I've got my flower bed badge. It could be anything that these children use to communicate, I'm feeling happy, I'm feeling joy. So this is where it gets really interesting because we're going to see each child take a really individual path towards novel language. Okay. There are four main ways that children can start to mitigate and play around with their gestalts. And I'm going to go into them all in a minute. But the four main ways, not the only ways, but the four main ways that you should be recognizing is trimming down, frame and slot, mix and match, and changing intonation. Okay. So trimming down is what you're guessing it is, really. So the child's first gestalt at stage one might be stick man lives in the family tree with his stick lady love and his stick children 3. They might trim that down just to stick man lives in the family tree. Then they might trim it down again to in the family tree and then trim it down again until we've just got the word tree. So you can see that the gestalts are going from really long, getting shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. Again, this is one that I have seen before. A child singing the song, You Are My Sunshine, My Only Sunshine, You Make Me Happy When Skies Are Grey. And then they might trim that down to You Make Me Happy When Skies Are Grey. Then they might trim it down to You Make Me Happy, which we can see is a really, really functional phrase, isn't it? We all know what you mean by that. And then you might get that trimmed down further again to happy. And then that may get linked to something like I feel happy. Okay. So that's what trimming down is. It's taking these really, really, really long gestalts and making them into smaller, more functional units. Frame and slot. So frame and slot is something that we see a lot of as well. And this is where children may take the frame of a gestalt and just replace certain words. So stickman lives in the family tree. You could do stickman laughs in the family tree. Stickman sits in the family tree. Stickman dances in the family tree. Stands, plays. It could turn into stickman laughs in the bath. It could then turn into Dougie laughs in the bath. So you can see what I mean. You're framing and slotting. So you're taking that frame and slotting different words in to change the meaning of the sentence. Mix and match. So mix and match, I'm going back to something. If you've seen my previous webinars, you will recognize this slide, but it's just the most glorious example of mixing and matching that I've ever seen. And I love the fact it's real from a child that I know. So this is a quote from Annie's speech and language report when I'd explained to her mum what Gestalt language processing was. So Annie's mum said she felt that that was accurate. She gave me an example from that morning. So often in the car, Annie's mother says, let's listen to Moana. That morning on Bluey, the character Bingo said, Daddy, I want to watch telly. And that morning, she combined from Daddy, I want to watch telly and let's listen to Moana. Daddy, I want to listen to Moana. So this is where the children mix and match. They take a chunk of one and a chunk of another, blend them together to make a new novel phrase. Okay. Changes in intonation, it is what it says. There's no fancy examples for this, but it's using the same words, but with the appropriate emotional intonation. So it might be like, I want a burger. I want a burger. I want a burger. So they're keeping exactly the same gestalt, but instead of changing the words, they're changing the style of delivery to carry meaning. And that's also another way of mitigating. I think people always tend to think that to mitigate a gestalt, you have to be doing something with the words. You don't always, you can change how you are delivering the words, and that's just as effective a way of altering the meaning behind the gestalt. Now, I've been asked this question a lot in nurseries with children that I'm working with who are Gestalt language processors, and staff have gone, how do I know that my child in my setting is moving from stage 1 to stage 2? What are those key clues that I need to be looking for? So I think if you notice that children are perhaps dropping words from familiar scripts, that can be a key that they're starting just to not stick to them in such a purist kind of way. Playing around with the word order, so maybe just getting brave and moving and shuffling a few things about, starting that mix and match cycle. I think when you start to get that feeling that a familiar gestalt is still a familiar gestalt, we still recognize it, but it just feels different in some way. You may not be able to put your finger on why that gestalt sounds different. You may just be like, that's the one they always say, but something's changed. It might be the intonation, it might be maybe it's a bit more clippy. I don't know, but you will just get this sense that something is changing. And often they just sound more intentional. So they sound a little bit more like the child is trying to get a message across. So how can you help? So in stage 1, the key is really, really, really trust and connection. And that continues into stage 2, but there are more practical things that you can start to do when you notice that shift into stage 2. So the first thing to remember, as I've just said, is many stage 1 tips are still relevant. Don't just drop the connection, the trust, the validation of language. If a child comes to you, says a gestalt or a mitigated gestalt, or whether it sounds different or the same to usual, validate it. Even if you don't know what it means, acknowledge it, give some kind of response. Let them know you know they're communicating with you. So just keep that acknowledgement going. Trust in their play, connect through play, don't force any issues, don't force your way of doing things onto the child, okay? And use natural, unintentional language at least 50% of the time. I always say with natural language acquisition, the clue is in the name. Keep it natural, okay? But when you are thinking about ways that you can be intentional with your language, there are some fantastic books for mitigation. So what we're looking for is those books that do a bit of frame and slotting. So they keep the main kind of prose throughout, but change a different thing. So, I wrote to the zoo to send me a pet. They sent me a lion, giraffe, camel, monkey, frog, puppy. Yeah. So you've got that frame, and then it's that last animal. Okay. And again, he was too big, grumpy, jumpy, naughty, scary. I sent it back. Okay, so that's an absolutely classic example of a really good book for that frame and slot style of mitigation. Again, brown bear, what do you see? So again, you can see all of the colors rolling through here. So that's another really good one. Ketchup on your cornflakes, and also we're going on a bear hunt. So again, that's lovely. Oh no, what's this? It's grass, swishy swooshy grass, or a river, um, lots of muddy things. It's I haven't read it for a while, but there are all of these rhyming books where one variable changes. They're the ones that you are looking for that are excellent for our Gestalt language processes in terms of reinforcing that mitigation is a really valid way of changing what we say to change the meaning in this story. Songs are also great as well. The wheels on the bus. So this is classic. The wheels on the bus, the baby on the bus, the people on the bus, the wipers on the bus. So again, we're looking at that frame and slot, changing those variables. So again, they go swoosh, 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 wah, 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 chatter, chatter, chatter. So you've got a couple within each sort of line or two if you're happy and you know it. So again, this has that dual benefit of not only demonstrating mitigating language, but also teaching some really great verbs and actions. So this is a really, really good one. Also remembering with songs that children really, really pick up on that sing-song kind of language. So we know from the evidence that Gestalt language processors thrive on a kind of sing-song rhythmic language. So actually, songs that mitigate are even better than books that mitigate, which are even better than just chit chat that mitigates. Songs are your kind of really, really good way in for the Gestalt language processing kids. Old MacDonald had a farm. So again, you're looking at the animal framing and slotting, and then the noise that they make. And then this is the way we brush our teeth. So again, this is really lovely because again, it's that super functional language. Okay, so I'm all up for animal sounds and I'm all up for things on buses, but brushing our teeth, washing our face, all of those things are really functional day-to-day bits of language that I think are really, really sort of more bang for your buck in terms of usefulness. The other things that you can do is offer a variety of communication opportunities. Now, I think we tend to go a little bit heavy sometimes on that requesting. Okay, so language to make our needs known. Obviously, that is hugely important. But what about expressing joy? What about being able to connect with someone just by going, this is brilliant. I'm buzzing. Like my little lad the other day, never marry a smoo. Yeah. He was having the best time and was so excited to be able to tell me that. And that's such an incentivizing thing. This child is now desperate to communicate with people because he is just able to do so and finds it so joyous. So expressing joy is really, really important for little children. Equally protesting. Now, this is something that I have to really, really teach a lot of early years practitioners several times over. So if you, and I can't remember if I'm jumping the gun and I've got a slide on this, apologies if I have, but when we are thinking protesting and conflict resolution, when we've got some challenging behaviours, this can be tough. So often children don't have the language to say, that's mine actually, thank you, or I was playing with that, or I don't want to share, for example. And I had an incident the other day of a child pushing another child because they didn't have the language to back up, what they wanted to say. So they pushed. And nursery said, "Oh yeah, well we told him what he did wrong." And I said, No, that's not the right thing to do. You need to give this child the language to replace the behavior. There's no point saying we don't push, kind hands, that kind of thing. You need to give the child the language. So that child pushes and you go, that's my toy. Give it back. Okay. Now, this can feel tricky for people because we feel that the first thing we need to do is to sort of reprimand that behavior. But actually, for your Gestalt language processors, that's not going to work. What you need to do is give them the language so that they can use that next time instead of the behavior. Okay. And this can take quite some time to wrap your head around. So don't worry if you don't get it right first time. But remember, you're replacing behavior with a Gestalt. You're replacing behavior with a script. Any other approach just won't be effective. Okay. So we're also thinking about communication opportunities to self-advocate. So, offering, a variety of snacks and asking them to choose what they would like, expressing their sensory preferences, requesting. But remember, don't force anything. Keep it natural and keep it fun. Just bear in mind, are you providing a breadth of opportunities for the children to communicate in different ways? You can at this point start to model useful gestalts. So again, I try and think maximally useful phrases. I try and think, if I've got this, how many things can I put on the end of this sort of sentence starter? Let's is amazing. And I use this all the time. Let's draw a picture. Let's go to the toilet. Let's play. Let's finish now. Let's, you do it with anything. It's time to, or it's time for, it's time to have our food, it's time for a book, it's time to go in the garden, it's time for mummy to come and get you. That's a really good one. Lots you can put on the end of that. Why don't we? Again, it's a bit like let's, but in a different way. Why don't we sit down? Why don't we read a book? Why don't we go and change your nappy? I see her, which again could be anything, can't it? We can, I need some. So again, within here as well, you've got some request gestalt. So I need some, but then you've also got some commenting, I see her, or why don't we? So you've got, lots of different sorts of things that you can use here. But remember, children moving into stage 2 will still be acquiring stage 1 gestalts. Just because they've moved into stage 2 and they're mitigating some of their more familiar ones, this won't stop them from acquiring stage 1 gestalts. So you're going to see the two kind of running together. Okay. Children stay at stage 2 for a fair amount of time. Okay. Because this is where they are starting to really explore how language works functionally and like really meaningfully. So obviously at stage 1, the language is meaningful to them, but not necessarily meaningful to everybody else. Stage 2 is where they start to be able to reach a wider audience and it becomes meaningful to more people. And they can start to kind of really see how things slot together. And it's the first experience of manipulating language intentionally. Okay. So we need to keep our language appealing to the child so they carry on picking up the stuff that we're doing. So remembering sing-song voices and keeping your intonation interesting. The other trap people fall into is thinking that children have got grammar. So grammar isn't grammar yet. Okay. So if you're seeing people go, I don't know, the cat caught the mice, or I don't know, so a good one would be the mouse saw the fox and the fox looked good or something. I think I probably got that bit wrong, but never mind. But the mouse saw the fox. So saw in the past tense, the child hasn't got true past tense, and the fox looked good. Looked, again, they haven't got that past tense yet. The use of the word and, they're not using conjunctions. They're not putting two things together like that just yet. It's just verbatim copied from the Gestalt. So it used to be as speech and language therapists, before we knew about Gestalt language process, and we go, oh yeah, well, they've got past tense, they've got plurals, they've got conjunctions, they've got everything, but why can't we make sense of what they're saying? So grammar isn't true grammar. And actually, this is why sometimes stage two language sounds really mismatched, because if a child mitigates two gestalts with different tenses, for example, if they mitigate one part of a gestalt with present tense and one with past tense, it can just sound a bit clunky and a bit mismatched and a bit, oh, that's not quite right. And I can't work out why. It's because they're not altering the grammar to fit, because the grammar to them isn't grammar yet. It's just two chunks that are copied. This is where I put it. So you're always providing a script, not a description, especially appealing when dealing with challenging behaviors. So when we're dealing with challenging behaviors, we're often providing a description. That's often our default. Please provide the script. It's really, really important that you communicate with other people the meaning of new gestalts or new mitigations. So if you see one, and you go, oh, yeah, that's new, or that's a new mitigation, but I know what that means, pop it somewhere where the rest of your team can see it. And also the parents as well. Don't forget the parents. They might not have cottoned on to this new mitigation yet. The more people who understand the child, the more incentivizing they're going to find communication. And you'll see that this really positive snowball effect that I've talked about. Listen for children fast forwarding through longer gestalts. So they might go, I don't know, stick man lives in the family tree with his stick, lady, love, and stick children three. Okay, so you can see there by the bit that they slow down for, the bit that they're moving towards mitigating. Equally, they may take a longer gestalt, but they may say one chunk more loudly than the rest. So if it's more loud or if it's slower than the rest, you know that the child is honing in on the chunk that they want to eventually take out and mitigate. Okay, so sometimes that can give a really useful clue as well. It's kind of almost like that pre-mitigation. It's that whole, I'm honing in on this bit. This is the bit I really, really like. I can't quite pull it out from the longer gestalt just yet, but I'm on my way. So that can be a little bit of a key. So be listening out for that also. We can't push children through stage two. Okay, we can't rush it. This is a really exciting stage, and it should be exciting for everybody. It's exciting for the child because they're learning that they can use their language intentionally and to a bigger audience. It's exciting for parents because parents can then suddenly see something changing. Okay, and this, I think, is the point where a lot of parents start to believe that it's all going to be okay. And they start to believe essentially what I've been telling them, which is don't worry, something's going to happen with all these gestalts at some point. Okay. And it's exciting for anybody who works with the child regularly. What we have to do is sit back, enjoy it, and keep modeling the language. Okay. We have to be ready to move forward with them, and we have to be ready to know what stage three is, but we have to wait until they're ready and not before. And I think some practitioners, when they know a little bit about Gestalt language processing, go, oh, great, they've mitigated something once or twice. We're well on the way now. This bit can take long. Okay, so just keep modeling that intentional language around about 50%, but no more than 50% of the time, and just watching the magic happen in front of you and continue that connection with the child. There is nothing more important than that. So what comes next? So next is stage three, which is referential single words. Okay, so this is where we are trimming down to the point where children actually know that, for example, in the first example I gave you, stick man lives in the family tree with his stick lady love and his stick children three. This will be the point where they've mitigated right down to the word tree, and they know that tree means that thing out there with the trunk and the leaves. This, rather than it just being part of a chunk of language that I have connected to an emotional feeling or an emotional experience. This is when they start to do that. So maybe they'll go, this is when they go, the wheels on the bus go round and round, and they pull it down so they know that bus is the thing that the people are sitting in, the big red thing or the big yellow metal thing with the wheels that the people are sitting in. That's the bus bit. So this is when they start to know that the words that they have been playing around with in great big chunks actually mean things on their own. Okay, so again, this now unlocks probably arguably the most intentional, meaningful bit of the whole natural language acquisition pathway, because this is when children learn that the words they've been playing with label stuff, okay, and that actually the word tree, I think the same thing for tree as Damon does, as Lisa does, as you do, as their friends do. We all know what tree means. And all of a sudden, you know, this child's going, oh, I'm not speaking like a foreign language to these people anymore. I say tree, everybody knows what I mean. This is exciting. And so this is where children can start to get really, really intentional with their language. Okay. And it's then and only then that we start to see the grammar come out in stages 4, 5, and 6. So if you want to find out more about Gestalt language processing, neurodiversity in general, I strongly advise that you go and have a look at these Instagram accounts. So Mrs. Speechy P, Speech Dude and Sensory SLP are all American speech and language pathologists, which is the American term for speech and language therapists. Mrs. Speechy P works with preschoolers. Speech Dude works with older children, but actually you'll learn a lot by following him. They're also engaged, so you know their household must be a riot. Oh no, they're not. Speech Dude and Sensory SLP are. Whoops, Mrs. Speechy P. I'm so tired. Mrs. Speechy P is an American speech language pathologist who is autistic herself and does the most glorious, glorious resources. Neuro Wild is an Australian speech and language therapist and illustrator, and Neuro D EY teacher. So the clues in the name here. So she's an early years teacher with a specialism in neurodiversity. She puts loads of excellent resources up for working with very, very young children. So that's a good one to follow for you guys. And Meaningful Speech. This is a speech language pathologist called Alex, and she is like the oracle at the moment on Gestalt language processing. She does the kind of postgraduate course that I've done on Gestalt language processing and natural language acquisition. So she is the one to follow if you want to know more about Gestalt language processing. Join us again, not the 6th of May and the 12th of May, because that is this week, but join us in June on June the 3rd and June the 9th for stage 3 GLP, and then join us on the 16th of June for our replay webinar on PDA. So this was a really well attended webinar. So it's on PDA, which the old acronym is pathological demand avoidance, but we now have retermed that pervasive drive for autonomy, which is a subtype of autism, which a lot of people are interested in learning more about. So please join us for them.